I could call today's episode a lens review video, but I'm actually going to call it more of a cry for help. Hello, I am Tim Little. I am a nighttime landscape artist living on the east coast of Massachusetts on Cape Cod. So up until this point, most of the gear videos that I've done have been hardware positive. I don't put out complaint videos or grievance videos because there's already a ton of that out there. And I really don't want that to be this. This is not going to be a hardware positive video. We're going to be talking about a lens today, but this is more about me showing you a problem that I'm having and hoping that somebody out there can help me uncover why this is happening. Now, I'd like to think that it's as easy as me just having done something wrong, and I hope that's the case. I have a feeling it's not. So this video is really for the folks out there that have experience with Pentax or shooting with Irix lenses. I'm going to call it Irix. It might be Irix, I-R-I-X. So forgive me for the rest of the video if that's not how it's pronounced and you hear me say Irix, Irix, Irix. Sorry. I'm essentially going to break this video down into 3 parts. I'm going to talk briefly about the lens and the features and the reason that I got it, why you might want one. The second thing I'm going to do is tell you about the problem that I've been having with it and the things that I've done to try to resolve it. And third, I'm going to show you exactly what that problem is and some interesting video I captured of the lens malfunctioning. The lens in question is the Irix 11mm f4 prime lens. On paper, it's a fantastic looking lens. Physically, it's a great looking lens. It's got a big bulbous glass front. You wouldn't be blamed if you thought it was a fisheye, but I do a lot of real estate work during the day and a lot of interiors with small spaces. And although my 15-30 from Pentax is a fantastic lens and pretty much shoots just about everything I need, including a lot of real estate, sometimes there's tight spaces I need to get into, small bathrooms, small closets, and that extra 4mm helps a ton. Another nice thing about the Irix lens is that it's rectilinear, so it doesn't have a lot of distortion. There's a little bit here and there depending on the circumstance, but for the most part, it really does keep the lines straight, and that's a huge time saver for post-processing. Optically, it's really good. I typically shoot around f8. That's like my magic spot for both my long exposure moonlit work and also my real estate stuff. And in that way, it works just amazingly well. I've had no complaints about what the Irix is supposed to do when it is working properly. Build quality on it is great. The main issue that I'm running into on the Irix 11mm is that it doesn't seem to understand the aperture that I'm asking for. In other words, on the Pentax K1 version 1, so Mark 1, there seems to be some sort of communication issue between the body and the lens. So when I ask for f8 and I'm looking at my light metering and everything's lined up just right, and I hit that button, I get something that might be 2 stops underexposed, and it looks more like I got maybe f11 or f13. But the metadata says I got f8. Now I could take that same picture immediately without changing any of the settings, and it might come up looking perfectly. The problem is that almost every other shot gives me something that I didn't ask for. Sometimes it's all of the shots. If I reset the camera by powering off, powering back on, sometimes that comes back. If I take the lens off the camera, sometimes that fixes the problem, but it doesn't stay consistent. Now, I know what you're thinking. What have you done to make sure that there's not something else going on? All right. So interestingly enough, this here is my 3rd copy of this exact model. I have 2 Pentax K1 Mark 1 bodies. The first copy of this lens that I got, which was last summer, immediately had this problem. I noticed it right away. So I sent it back to where I purchased it from because I was well within the 30 days. I was within like 3 hours of opening the box. I got another one within a few days, and it worked great for about 5 weeks. And then the aperture problem came back. Not only that, but sometimes the aperture will just start spasming on its own. It will just start opening and closing, opening and closing, opening and closing. And that's what the first one had done on the first night that I had this lens. So a little frustrating, obviously, and outside the return policy of the store that I had bought it from. So I contacted Irix, let them know what was going on, and they had me send that lens back in November to their repair vendor. Now, I'm not going to give a name, but they are in the western part of the United States. I'm in Massachusetts. Okay, everything is west from here because I'm like as far on the East Coast as you can get. I'm like 10 minutes from the water. Well, they had it for 7 months. 7 months. I got to the point where I sort of forgot that I even owned the lens. And then I remembered that I had this thing out for repair. With the pandemic and everything, I understand that we have to be more patient, and I'm totally fine with that. But at some point, enough time has gone by. I had some communication initially, about 2 months in, just saying, hey, what's going on? I heard back from the repair vendor that they were really backed up with Irix lenses specifically, and I was about a week away from getting that lens back. Well, another 5 months went by, and they stopped responding to my emails. So I had to go back to Irix directly, tell them what was going on. And to their credit, they sent me a replacement lens. So I didn't have to deal with the vendor anymore. They're going to have to collect it on their own, which leads us to this one. Both of the K1 bodies had the exact same firmware, which was one version behind. So I went and updated both of those, just thinking maybe that would help me fix this problem. And it did not. They continue to both exhibit the same problem with this lens. The first video I'm going to show you is what it looks like from my point of view when I'm using my live view on my K1 to sort of meter my scene and what happens when I take the picture and the interesting thing that happens immediately after I take the picture. This is how things look with the 15-30 attached. This is sort of my control. So if you look at the meter, we're pretty much even. I hit the button for the shutter and I get exactly what I expected to get. If I underexpose it a little bit, again, not changing the aperture, I again get what I expect based on the live view. And then if I overexpose it a little bit, no surprise, I get exactly what I expect. So as you can see here, there's nothing wrong with the K1 itself, and it's communicating with the 15-30 just fine. Here we are with the 11mm now attached to the same camera body just a few minutes after using my 15-30. And you'll see that I am sticking with the same aperture of f8. I am at ISO 320, so those are unchanged. If you recall, I needed to be at around 1/160th in order to get a balanced shot according to the metering. Right now, this shows 1/20th. So obviously, we are overexposed, and that is what I would expect to happen. So I dial it back down to about where it needs to be based on the metering, take the shot, and wow, that is underexposed. So then I dial back. Now 120 shows me it's balanced, but it really isn't because that's the shot I get, and now it tells me it's overexposed. So I dial back down, and oh, look at that. The shot actually looks fine. But what happened here? I take the same shot again without changing anything, and now it's too dark. So this is the frustration and misery of using this particular lens. The next video I'm going to show you is what the Aperture Blades do when I go from f4 upwards towards f8. And I think you're going to find this really interesting. Just as a side note, f4 works great all the time. f4 seems to always be f4, which would be great if I always shot at that aperture, but for some of the work I do, that is a completely useless number to me. The problems start as soon as I move up to 4.5 and get worse at 5 for some reason. So check this out. f4. That's f4.5 according to this model. And that is f5. And that bigger aperture is 5.6. And that is 6.3. And that is 7.1. And that is 8. So here we are with f4. 4.5 goes off the cliff real quick. Then we go to 5. But 5.6 actually gets a little bit brighter. And even the metering agrees with that. 6.3 a little darker. But if we scroll backwards, the metering actually looks a little bit more accurate. There it is. That is the issue that I'm having. And again, 3 different copies of that lens on 2 K1 Mark 1s, exact same problem. Now, the only thing that has not been swapped out in this situation is the photographer. So this video is not to be like, this lens is terrible and it's trash and don't buy it. It looks like a great lens, and I really want to be able to use it. I'm just hoping that there's someone out there that knows something that I don't know. If you're someone who thinks that maybe I need to go into the menu and fix something on the K1, C26 in the settings allows you to adjust the aperture ring control. That does not apply here, and it didn't help because I just did it anyway. But there wasn't anything else in the menu system that I could find to assist me with this problem. And the fact that it works occasionally and doesn't work other times tells me that it's probably just a compatibility issue. But I don't know anybody else who has purchased this lens, and all the reviews that I have read have been really positive. So maybe I've just been blessed with bad luck, shall we say. Now, just as a side note, I've never owned an Irix lens before. This was my first one. And I know there's a lot of folks in the night photography community that swear by the 15mm Irix. And it looks like a fantastic lens also. And I would consider getting it. My 15-30 is fine, so I don't really need that. But I'm not sure I'll buy another Irix product at this point. To be fair, Irix Direct, they were very responsive and they were helpful, but it was their repair vendor that kind of soured the experience for me, because what good is a warranty if you can't get your lens serviced? Essentially, when you buy this lens, there's not really going to be a support system in place for you if something goes wrong. So if you must have one, I might suggest buying some sort of extended service agreement, maybe through the store that you get it from. Sometimes you can do that through like a Best Buy scenario or chain store, where they will just replace the lens for you on site. That might be really the only way to go. Please let me know in the comments if this is something you have an idea about. I will read them and I will try them. And in the event that I come across a suggestion that works for me, I'm going to do another video and explain exactly what that was. In the meantime, I'm probably going to take this lens and send it off to one of my Nigtaxian co-hosts and see if maybe they could mess around with it a little bit and see if the problem duplicates on their end. And then if it does, I'll feel a little bit better in that I'm not doing something wrong or just completely overlooking something that is really silly to overlook. So thanks for taking the time to watch this. And you Pentaxian and Irix folks out there, let me know what you think. Anything is appreciated at this point. And I will see you again in the next video. Take care.